This free video is brought to you by the Team Topologies Academy. Our goal is to help organizations become more effective and more humane. If you find this video helpful, we would love for you to check out and recommend our Academy content. It's also my pleasure to have my co-author Matthew Skelton here with us today, so we can hear from him as well, his perspective on how things have changed and also on some of the questions that are common among our students. Hey, Matthew.
Good to be here. It seems like a long time that we recorded that Platforms and Product course, but it's actually not that long, is it? A couple of years.
I was actually looking that up, and it's about 3 years almost to the date that it was published. So let's see if things have changed a lot or not. That's actually the first point. From my perspective, what I've seen is actually a big sort of increase in the adoption of these ideas. Obviously, partly due to the success of Team Topologies. Team Topologies, the book has been published for 5 years. And obviously the platform concept in particular, treated as a product, has been very influential in helping address cognitive load problems in what we call streamlined teams or product teams, if that's more familiar to you. The other thing that has happened is the rise of the idea of platform engineering, right? And that's actually a question I get often. How does Team Topologies or the ideas of platform as a product relate to platform engineering? In my perspective, it's crucial to make platform engineering successful, because if you don't have a clear idea why are you building this platform, you can be using the most amazing technology, you can be building amazing solutions, but if they don't have actual internal customers, or if they're not a good fit to help reduce cognitive load on those internal teams, then you're sort of missing the point. So from my experience, obviously, there's a lot of changes in technology, and that continues to happen. And so we need a strong engineering approach to the platform, but the product side is what really makes it stand out and make it valuable. If you agree with that.
Yeah, and if you unpack it, I mean, this is something that that Valiantjev and I talked to on a webinar last week, which is on the Team Topologies website now, where we're talking about kind of the project to product transition. But ultimately, like if you think about product, effectively what we've done when we're taking a product-centric approach, or product thinking at least, is we've started with the needs of the users that we're trying to meet. And it turns out starting with the user needs is like a massively radical thing that, like, for me and you, like, it was kind of, I guess it was fairly obvious that you'd want to do that. Turns out for loads of organizations, like starting with the user needs and then working backwards, it's like voodoo, or it's like some crazy new approach. But it delivers the results, because then we build only enough that we need to build or provide to, we put in place just enough to meet those user needs and no more. And so therefore we're way more nimble, way more effective. We're not building up huge amounts of inventory or technical debt or whatever you want to call it that just isn't actually any use. But so the whole something as a product, like platforms as a product approach, is way more effective, but it's very, very unfamiliar to lots of people who are coming from a traditional infrastructure or platform engineering or that kind of space. So there's a big gap effectively in sort of awareness, ways of working, mindsets, that kind of thing in this space. Like product management in general for loads of organizations, but particularly in the kind of technology platform space. Huge gap.
Yeah, I sometimes talk in my workshops about you can combine both kind of the objectives of traditional platforms, which you're alluding to, I believe, in terms of, well, we need to reduce costs of infrastructure, we need to better manage centrally this technology that many teams rely on. And that has been the typical focus of traditional platforms. It doesn't mean that we need to relinquish that. It's just the starting point for a platform as a product is exactly to meet the user needs of our internal teams. So it's more like a little bit like the Agile Manifesto. It's focus on user needs and minimal viable platform or thinnest viable platform over focus on reducing costs at all cost and managing technology. But we'll come back to this topic of product management in the platforms because there is a question exactly about that.
Are you going to share You're going to share your stuff about the platform manifesto? Are you going to share that later?
Good point. We can have a look at that.
Directly related, right? Yeah, I'll dig it out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good point. We did publish that recently. It's a good sort of starting point as well. But I would like to go into the questions from our students. So questions that have been coming along in the past couple of years. Some of these happen multiple times. So let's get right into it. One question, a fair question, which is this course, Platform as a Product, is a 2-3 hour course. And we cover mostly the ideas of applying product management into internal platforms. And people want help. How do I implement this in a practical way? And there's no silver bullet. Obviously, there's no recipe. I suggest looking at all the case studies that are available. Some that were already included in the course at the time, those 3 years ago, companies like USwitch, HelloFresh, Adidas, doing really interesting stuff. And we've been publishing more examples on the teamtopologies.com website, so you can have a look at those as well. But obviously, you always have to look at the case studies and figure out what is more applicable to your context, what would be more important to do, maybe something similar. There's no recipe. That said, I do have to share that we have a more hands-on, practitioner-driven course around platform as a product coming in 2025. I'm really excited about that. Really great people who have been doing this day in and day out, who are going to deliver more sort of practical tips on how to apply this. So that will be coming in 2025, probably later in the year. So look up for that. But that's kind of, for now, this is what we can share. Another question that we have frequently is, how could a platform team cooperate with enabling teams? So the enabling teams are usually small teams of experts in some domain, which are helping the stream-aligned teams or product teams sort of bridge some gap in their knowledge around that domain. The domain can be anything. It could be related to things that are typically provided in a platform around infrastructure or continuous delivery, SRE, whatever. There is a gap in some of the teams that we need to address. The enabling team is a good approach. And effectively, we could go a step further and we could say the enabling teams should help co-evolve the platform. What this means is that they are in a good position as they are working on the ground with the product teams. They are helping them take steps forward in their knowledge and their abilities. They're also seeing what are the workflows in these teams, what are the things that are difficult, what are the things that maybe are not so difficult, so they don't need help from the platform. And if they can then collaborate with the actual platform group or platform teams in that group, they are in a good position because they have a broader vision to help the platform team make better decisions on what to build or what to offer or not in the platform. There's also an aspect of this becomes even more important the larger the organization. If you have a few product teams, if you have up to let's say 10 product teams, then the platform teams should be talking to them very regularly, right? Should have a very clear vision of what's happening in the organization. But at a larger scale, I would say when you start to have 20, 30 or more product teams, it becomes hard for the platform team to really have a good feel of what's happening on the ground. So this pattern is very, very powerful. There's also an example. Actually, we talk about this example from the company USwitch in the course. They actually got to a point where they had a very small SRE team, so site reliability engineering enabling team that you see on the left, the vertical in kind of purple color. So this was exactly what was happening. They were, yes, helping the yellow horizontal streamline teams improve their practices, understand more about SRE, but they were also communicating and collaborating with the platform team to tell them, hey, this is what we're seeing. Many teams are struggling to get the dashboard up or getting proper alerts. So could you help with that? This kind of approach. Is this something you have seen as well, Matthew?
So, yes, the additional thing, of course, is that sometimes the enabling team is not an ongoing, not an ongoing team. It's not formed and retained with a particular expertise. It might just be that we occasionally act, some people from the platform occasionally act like an enabling team. And so they take on the role, they put on the hat of an enabling team, a group of people from the platform. Let's say it's cloud infrastructure, or let's say it's consumer data. And they put on the hat of an enabling team, and they work like an enabling team for like a few days, maybe a week or something, helping some streamlined teams to upskill. But then effectively that enabling team sort of disappears, if you like. It's more like an apparition or a mirage, and then they go back to working in the platform. So it's more like a dynamic. And actually, but making it clear that the purpose of that team at that point in time is different. We're not there to build you anything at that point. We're there to uplift your skills and capabilities, detect where there's some gaps, and so on and so on. And then next week, we're going to go back into the platform and work on the platform again. But like having that distinction seems actually quite valuable because it avoids people getting confused about what's supposed to be happening on the ground.
Yeah, totally. I've seen now many times that pattern of platform as enabling team on occasions, and that can work quite well because effectively, typically people working that platform team are domain experts around the topic of that platform. So there's actually an example from Adidas. The platform engineering group at Adidas is expected to spend up to 50% of their time in what they call kind of advisory and community work, which effectively, when you look at it, is we're helping teams understand what is the platform doing, what can help them, what are the good practices, and all these things from a facilitating point of view. And even in some cases, I recommend, especially if organizations are starting some kind of new platform initiative, I strongly recommend that before they even build anything, that they start facilitating the teams, the product teams, because usually the platform is trying to address also some gap more from a execution service perspective. But the product teams might not have the knowledge to even understand why do I need this observability service, for example, if they have never done something like that. So I do recommend that. It's, again, a little bit hard because it's very unfamiliar to tell or to ask platform teams to even start by facilitating and not, go off and build something. So it has happened to me where I recommend this, and they tell me, well, we already have all these deadlines to deliver the platform services and functionality, and then it's a bit difficult because everything's already expected that it's all about building stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you actually went out and listened to what some of the streamlined teams actually need, then you'd realize you don't need to build all those things. We don't need to build as
Probably.
much.
Yep.
Or at least you don't need to build them all now. Like, do this one specific thing. What's the smallest thing you can build which is going to deliver value? That should be the way that we work all the time, right? What's the smallest thing you can build which is going to deliver value today? Start on that first, and then kind of sense and respond. So, like, the whole approach to, which is, I put a comment in there to Henrik. Are we taking approaches which is a bit like minimum viable product MVP? And it's not exactly the same, because the whole thrust of this sort of start with user needs approach is, let's try and build the smallest amount of stuff, the most valuable things first, or the most kind of unlocking things first. And you'd expect then to have effectively less work in progress, because you're actually able to just zoom into the stuff which is the most important stuff to build now. And there's a load of stuff which you say, well, actually, do you know what? We don't need to build that yet, because there's no evidence that anyone wants it. Because the problem with big product backlogs is there's lots of assumptions in there. If we actually go and talk to people and really sense what's the smallest slice of value, then we've got more space to kind of react and to continue to zoom into the value and so on. So, like, but it's a challenge, because then maybe that stuff is less expensive for the people in the organization who want to control a big budget. It's actually a challenge to that kind of budgeting process, where they've got, if they're only in control of a £1 million or $1 million budget instead of a $10 million budget, then it's not seen as impressive or whatever. But it's, you know, it's the route to better organizational effectiveness if we're really truly reaching out and just doing the smallest amount of work needed to satisfy those needs.
Essentially, you need to finance the platform as a product, as a continuous thing of value to the organization, that you then need to explore what is the next piece of value to the internal teams over creating a bigger budget with very specific outputs. We come back to that question again. Are you investing on specific outputs, or are you investing in outcomes for your internal teams? And then the two approaches can be quite different. Focusing on outcomes means you need to do a lot of discovery in the platform itself. It's not about go off and make a plan and execute, which, yes, seems easier and more traditional way, but it doesn't focus on the actual understanding the needs and the outcomes you want. Great. I think it's a good lead into the next question, which is super interesting as well, which is, how should a platform organize itself internally? Or how should we organize? It might also answer that question from Aldeep. How relevant are these teams for enterprise B2B software? It's effectively similar. We can maybe try and answer the two questions together. Thanks, sure. Aldeep. So it's a little bit like a Russian doll, right? There's the idea that we talk in the book in Team Topologies of this fractal approach to how we organize, where typically inside the platform, as a group, you would expect to find similar patterns as outside of the platform. So I've been saying sometimes this to some customers, think about the platform team more as a kind of stream-aligned team or product team working inside a platform grouping. In the book, we talk about platform teams, because it was a clear way to talk about 4 types of teams. But when you get especially to a scale where you have multiple teams working on multiple things inside the platform, you do need to have this kind of alignment like you should have outside of the platform. Meaning you need to identify the streams of value, what are the different services, different areas that your internal teams need help with, and then the platform teams should be aligned to those as well. So something like this, right? If you look at in a visual way, kind of the logical platform is composed of platform stream-aligned teams that one team might be working on, let's say, infrastructure provisioning service, another on monitoring and telemetry service, as an example, right? And then you might even have another platform that is taking care of even kind of lower level aspects, and this higher level platform is using the lower level platform. You could potentially even have a complicated subsystem team taking care of very complicated algorithm that is used inside the platform. That's more of an exception, I would say, but it could happen. So the same patterns we talk about in team topologies could exist inside the platform group. It's more of a logical way of grouping the teams as a platform, rather than there's no radical difference in how they should work and focus on value.
If you see one of these diagrams like this, there should be no way particularly to understand which part of the organization we're talking about, because if you look at that, the inner blue platform, the one that's in a darker blue, we could treat that as some external infrastructure. You could treat it as a SaaS. You could treat it as some internal data platform or something. So you don't really know, and that's the point. It's fractal, and we get to the point where we're using the same patterns, whether we're using the same kind of types of interaction, the same types of groupings, whether we're using internal platforms or external platforms, it's the same way of thinking about it. And that's really powerful. The phrase there's a similar phrase that's used by John Smart and his co-authors in Sooner, Safer, Happier, and he calls it nested value streams. And it's a very similar concept. It's not exactly the same, but it's very, very similar. Nested as in like the Russian dolls that Manuel, that you showed before, right? And it's the same kind of concept. We've got multiple different nested value streams at multiple different levels of the organization. In team topologies terminology, then it's kind of different groupings of teams that bring value. Sometimes a grouping is a platform. In fact, do you remember we talked about this in Slack in 2018. We realized before the book was published that the word platform, a platform is not a team, it's a grouping. And then, I don't know, it got lost in translation somewhere, and that didn't make it into the final version of the book.
It's like an alias, I would say. Platform team is an alias that helps us discuss sometimes, but in practice, at any sort of relevant scale, you need to have the platform teams be more specifically identified as, are they working on a stream that provides value to the internal customers of the platform, or are they, could be working on a complicated subsystem inside the platform, or even enabling team inside the platform. I think the key aspect to me is that if your platform is growing, it could start at something like, let's say, a cloud infrastructure type of platform. And you might only have one team working on some helpful stuff for your internal teams. That's all fine and good. But if you're growing and you start to see, we need more people to provide even better services to our internal teams, and you start having more than multiple teams, then that's where it gets, or you start having one very large team trying to do many things that require different skills, different responsibilities. That's where it starts to get messy, and you should really think about, hey, let's stop for a second and think about how do we align and identify the different streams of value that the platform has and align the teams to those. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to continue to scale the platform, and you're going to get into all sorts of blocking dependencies between people, between teams, and it gets very messy and inefficient as well. So you can use techniques like we developed, like the independent service heuristics, or you can use kind of more event storming techniques or domain-driven design techniques, or whatever helps you to identify when your platform is becoming or starting to look a little bit like kind of monolith, where it seems like it's doing a lot of things and it's too coupled, and you need to split into what are the different services or streams that we should really make independent in the platform. Then you can use some of those techniques.
That kind of speaks to that question from Aldeep as well. Aldeep, you're asking, can you please clarify, streamlined team is said to be about 7 to 9 people. What if we have a streamlined team of about 30 people? How are they supposed to be organized? Is it like agile teams under streamlined team? I don't know exactly what that means, but yes, from a teams bodies perspective, we want to keep we want to keep trust as high as possible, because with high trust, we can make decisions very quickly. So therefore, we need to limit the team size to about 9 people. So if you've got 30 people kind of in the same area, then the terminology that we would use for that is a grouping of teams. So you'd expect to have, what's that? You'd expect to have maybe 3, perhaps 4 teams in that area, depending on what they're working on. Perhaps slightly more, but if you've actually done the thinking about what the value is in that grouping, then you've probably identified a few different kind of logically separate flows. Effectively, there might be a few different ways to compose that value out of different teams, and maybe there's a small platform in there as well. So those 30 people will end up, instead of being in one big group, which it's really difficult to get really high trust with 30 people. So you can get reasonable trust, but to get super high trust where you can make decisions really quickly, you need to shrink down the size of the group of the teams to sort of up to about 7 or 8 people, possibly less. You might work really well with groups of like teams of 5 or 6, could do, in which case brilliant. But just one big group of 30. If you're trying to move quickly, you need to have high trust for decision making, and so you're not going to be able to move very quickly with 30 people.
I agree, and I would add that if you're trying to have the same group of 30 people working on everything or being able to work on everything, and because the group won't have that high trust, it typically leads to, effectively, you could call it technical debt in the thing that you built, because different people are making different decisions about what to build, what to offer, and how to build it. And over time, those things tend to become more different, and you start having more of decisions that other people don't understand. They don't know why this was done like this, and they might not agree with it. Whereas if you have smaller teams that have a clear scope and a clear kind of ownership of part of what the platform offers, that smaller group with high trust will have also a high degree of coherency in terms of decisions they make about what they build and how they build it, including what technology they use, tools, etc. But especially this kind of coherence over time of what are we doing, what are we trying to achieve, why did we build X instead of Y? This kind of approach.
It's more of a
good question.
More of like a stewardship for the continued evolution of that service or thing, instead of just, oh, let's get this feature out of the door. We're really caring about the health of the service, that the code base, and the health of the service that we're working on. We're being mindful of things like cognitive load. So speaking to Henrik's new question, yes, absolutely mindful of cognitive load. There may be decisions that we're making as we're introducing new things, that we may make some decisions which are deliberately around cognitive load, and the team that continues to work on that thing on an ongoing basis then is aware of the kind of cognitive load or the mental effort that's involved in dealing with this particular solution or this particular problem, whatever. Whereas if you're just coming in and working across any part of the system, you won't have that context in the same way. And so you might end up increasing cognitive load on the people that then have to come and work on it later. So it's definitely part of the dynamic is cognitive load as we're thinking through the best way to evolve these different parts of the system.
Yep. So let's move on to the next question. People are asking if we can share more examples of what the thinnest viable platform might look like. I still want to go back to the example that is included in the course, in the platform as a product course. this is from Food Asylum. They were one of the early adopters of team topologies. And I still think this is a really clear example where, so Food Asylum is a sports and sneakers retail company with shops. I think they're pretty big in the UK, and they've expanded to other countries. And so they needed a service that in the platform that would provide the location of stores. And initially they thought about, okay, we need this service with this API and the database, and we need to do discovery of the shops and all this. And then they sort of took a step back and said, actually, how often does this change, that we have a new store, or there's an update to maybe a store that has closed down, etc. And it's really infrequent. So they decided, actually, if we just have essentially that data about the stores in a JSON file, we provide an easy way to access and find data you need, and then it's going to be much more effective and faster to provide this. And that's what they did. And I believe that's still running. Maybe if anyone at Food Asylum, if you have updates. But this was a really good example of this thinnest viable platform approach, in terms of, yes, we could build this bigger thing that would take maybe a couple months or several weeks, versus we can actually deliver this in a few days, and it meets the needs of the teams. And also it's maintainable, right? Obviously there's an aspect of making sure the platform itself is maintainable over time.
There's also a really good success story online. I've just put the link in the chat, from a company in New Zealand called TradeMe. They it's like online retail, and they specifically use the idea of thinnest viable platform to actually help them execute way better. And they've got two key success metrics. So let me just copy some stuff out here, and I'll just copy like a tiny chunk of the entire case study and put it in the chat. But it's worth having a look at it. But if you search the Team Topologies website for TradeMe.
Sorry, Matthew, do you want to share your screen so that
I can share it? I mean, or you can share it
in the recording, then people will be able to see what you're talking about. I'll stop sharing on my side.
I'll share mine then. So it's this one here. So TradeMe here. Got a nice Kiwi logo for New Zealand. So TradeMe is New Zealand's largest marketplace and classified ads site. So 700,000 unique users across the web and mobile apps. So pretty busy in New Zealand. And we're not going to go through all of it here, but there's some really interesting aspects. You can see there they started on like a 1999 Apple Mac thing. And then
that
now
looks like
mobile.
1999.
It looks like 1999. It's kind of really cool, right? But they've got some vision and guiding principles. There's some really cool stuff in here. So like, I'll just make this slightly bigger for the recording. But look at these interesting metrics, measures of success. Time to first hello world. So how quickly can we get the first like hello world application, simplest application up and live? Like, that's a really interesting metric. So we're not trying to build something massive. We're trying to get something as small as possible. How quickly can we enable that thing to be there? And then some kind of measure around reducing or limiting or dealing with the cognitive load on the development teams that are using it. And so they've used thinnest viable platform to help guide how they do stuff inside in platform engineering. So look, the thinnest viable platform's technical governance is very strict about the what and how of the TVP implementation. It's kind of minimalist, and it's really making sure that they're always focused on the value, to the people consuming that platform. And skip towards the end. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's in. It's really worth reading. So here we go. They're really guided by the stuff that's in the Teach Bodies book. But by reducing the cognitive load on developers, a good platform helps development teams focus on the germane or differentiating aspects of the problem, increasing personal and team level flow, and enabling the whole team to be more effective. That's kind of exactly what we're after by the kind of thinnest viable platform approach. So it's really worth reading. And they're continuing to evolve this stuff, so we might have a follow-up story later. But yeah, it's worth. It's a real example of someone using exactly the thinnest viable platform approach in a real context, serving 700,000 monthly users or whatever it was. You could learn a lot from like following this approach here, and then kind of fitting it into your own context.
That's great. Let me share my screen again. Yeah, so that's another great example. We even actually, I believe you did this, Matthew, at the time. So a couple years back, somehow seems much longer ago, but it's probably just a couple years back. This wiki as a platform example. So there's actually a GitHub repository with examples of thinnest viable platform. But just to give this idea, like at some point, again, the scale is important. If you are in a startup, but maybe you don't have a platform team and you're not expecting to have one dedicated team for a while, even just getting people to understand this concept of the TVP and share kind of good approaches and how to do simple things, how to do things in a simple way, so that everyone, even in a small organization, knows, hey, here's let's say a wiki page describing our platform, logical platform, which is, use this services, use this configuration, etc. Even that could be sort of to some extreme thinnest viable platform in that context. Obviously, it depends on at certain scale, you start to expect that you have actual running services that help you.
Well, I think it's the important point is, just go back to that one, is that like in a Teachability sense, platform is not the nicest word really, because it means lots of different things. But anyway, in Teachability sense, a platform is anything that improves flow and reduces cognitive load in teams that use it. So if a wiki page with some very carefully chosen services that are all external, if that wiki page improves flow and reduces cognitive load, then it acts like a platform. This is the key thing. And if we don't need to build anything else now, why would we build anything else? Like, let's keep it as thin as possible. So the thinnest version that we could come up with basically was like a wiki page which lists a whole lot of stuff which is provided externally. And we're saying we're curating an experience. We're saying don't use the 1,000,001 other services that Amazon provides. Just use these, whatever it is. What's 1, 2, 3, 4? It's about 10 different services. Just use these 10 services, because for our context here, that's all you need. And whoever's put that wiki together has done the work to understand what's really needed for that context. It's constraining the options in a good way. It's saying, don't look at all this other stuff because it's too complicated, or it's not relevant, or it's too difficult to use, or whatever. Or maybe we've not even done the due diligence on the security aspects of these other services, so we can't even sign off on using them. But hey, if you use these services, this will work really fine. Just crack on with it. Go for it. That is improving flow and it's reducing cognitive load. So like, it's a good example of where to start with a platform like a wiki page, which is curating a sensible set of starting points.
Yep. Can you still see the shared screen? Do you see it, Matthew?
I can see it. Yeah.
I just had a little glitch. I wasn't sure. That's a great topic. And then another kind of common question that we already surfaced a bit, but let's look into more detail. What are the main differences between managing platform products and application products? Where application products are those that you provide to your end customers and users, right? I would say the main difference is obviously platform product is for internal customers and application product is for external customers. That implies some awareness that our internal customers are also our peers, right? So there can be some different dynamics. You should have a clear advantage that you should be able to talk to your internal customers, to other teams in the organization, figure out what do they need, and kind of have a good dynamic with them. But depending also on the culture of the organization, it could also be more pressure, because I don't know, if there's more of a blame culture in the organization, then could be negatively affecting the platform team. That's the thing you need to be aware of. But fundamentally, this is the key difference to be mindful of. And I would say the other thing related to that is, in my opinion, internal platforms demand even stronger product management skills. You need these product management skills in all the teams that are building something for a certain kind of users, right? You need them in your end product teams, if you like, the stream-aligned teams outside the platform. But inside the platform, because you have this particular dynamic of the customers are your internal teams, and because it tends to be more technical products, if you like, sometimes you don't have an actual graphical interface. It's everything provided through APIs, for example. You need a very good product management skills in the platform. This is something I would say has not changed much since 3 years ago. At least conversations I have with leadership in platforms, it comes up time and time again. Now, we need better product management, but we don't have the people. It's actually, I would say, an area where many organizations struggle to find people with the right experience to do product management well. And then they don't prioritize having these people inside the platform. So it's actually quite a problem. And the other question related to that, people ask me, okay, should we have then a technical person act as a product manager? And the thing is, a platform product manager needs actual product experience, actually been through kind of the hardships of prioritizing, of communicating with people and users and customers and telling them sometimes, no, we're not going to build this because it's not aligned to our roadmap for the platform because we have too many demands. They need to be experienced in terms of focusing on outcomes and not so much on a plan and specific outputs. All these things you really only get, I believe, with actual product management experience. You could get kind of the technical view. Is something you need to understand the technical aspects of the product, of the platform as a product, but you don't need to have been working and developing the technology to understand it. So this is, I believe, is quite important. You do need people with the product management experience who understand the overview of the technical side. But when you try to have a very technical person who has in-depth knowledge of the technology, but they don't have actual experience of product management, it doesn't work so well, or it's not enough. All right, so we can move on. I believe this is the last question, last but not least, and a common and a fair question: how to address resistance and criticism to this approach, which is unfamiliar for many people, as we were saying before. Not everyone, and we were mentioning also the budgeting aspects, not everyone is okay with saying, we don't know what the platform team is going to do exactly, but we still need to fund them because our teams need help to go faster, to reduce time to market. Like in that Hello World example, we need to be able to get that out the door much faster, so we can then iterate and figure out what do we need to do to make this new application or service actually profitable, helpful for the users, etc. So how do we address this resistance and criticism? I would say there are three starting points. Start small. Like if this is a really new approach, you want to treat it more as a kind of pilot. So to have some space to discover and show how things can be done in a different way, right? Instead of trying to secure a big budget to do already big plans to do things in a very different way, you might have, good intentions. You want to apply a platform as a product, but it's going to be much, I would say, more difficult if you already have a lot of pressure from the beginning to deliver stuff in this platform as a product approach, because your CEO or your CFO, if they're funding this new approach, they don't really, they want to see the results, right? So I recommend to start small, share as much as possible success stories, typically from the teams that start to use the platform. If they themselves can share, yes, we were able to get the Hello World application example out the door with the help of the platform in half the time, or even 1/10 of the time, whatever it might be. Make sure that those stories are shared. And from a platform point of view, you need to focus on showing value from day one, right? When you are, and you will be typically in a position at some point where people are going to ask questions. Okay, we've invested this much. What do you have to show for it, basically? And typically at that moment, it's not enough to say, well, the platform is doing well, it's being used by our teams. You typically need to be more informed, or you need to provide more information to how does this actually relate to the business goals and the value that the platforms should be providing. So just to show an example of that, from Adidas, I mentioned before, they have this very strong platform engineering group. And this is from one of their presentations from the platform. And you can see probably that what they're talking about in terms of the value of their digital platform is about freeing up time for teams, supporting revenue increases, also in some cases supporting or helping with cost savings because they had better integration of common data services. What's really happening here is they're talking the business language, right? Cost saving time, reducing time to market. So this is something you need to adapt to your context, but you need to figure out not just your internal metrics on is the platform being used, are our customers, our internal teams, are they happy with the platform? Is it reliable? Those are needed, but you also need to have this kind of view more from almost like the CFO point of view. What would they need to see to show the value of the platform, right?
There's
and then
a great story I can share if you want on that.
Yeah, that
just
would be
like
great.
from a different perspective. So I'll share my screen in a second, but when I was working for the UK government back in 2018, I was working alongside some of the people in the infrastructure kind of cloud platform area, literally sitting next to them. So we would talk all the time. And they did some work around reducing cloud costs from the platform. And the platform was effectively enabling the application teams to reduce their cloud costs by providing metrics and stuff like this. There's actually there's a really great case study online published on the UK government website. I'll put it in the chat, but I can share my screen. It's a really great example. In fact, this work won an award. I think this year, last year, the work won an award, like an industry award for how they did it. If you just stop sharing, I can share my screen here.
Oh,
There's a really
sorry
cool
about that.
thing sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a really cool thing they did, which was so the title here is how the Immigration Technology Department reduced its cloud cost by 40%. And this is the platform that's helping the application, the streamline teams to be more effective. But part of that is actually by reducing cloud costs. And that speaks to the CFO persona, like you just said, Manuel, right? And they came up with this cool visualization here, which is a bit like the energy efficiency labels that you get on consumer goods. And they're saying basically, hey, at the moment, your application is running quite hot. It's using lots of cloud. It's got high cloud costs. You could reduce your cloud costs by doing something different. And they're providing that level of granularity to these application development teams to be able to make those choices. And that's a hugely powerful thing, because you're able to say, basically, as it says at the top of the article, reduce cloud costs by 40%. There's the business value, and that's what that platform is providing. So it's a very clear line to like real business value that the CFO cares about, and they're thinking about like how they implement platform. This is really technical, like kind of cloud infrastructure stuff, but the way in which they're approaching it is empowering these teams to have better success. And the platform as a whole then is helping towards those kind of business goals. It's a super example. And as I say, I think it won an award recently, and we can maybe share some more detail later if there's a follow-up message. We can put some more details in there. But it's a brilliant example of exactly that kind of mindset.
It's very cool. And one more thing we had already talked about before, this idea of consider facilitating first as a platform group. If you have that chance, you are actually showing value. You can be showing value of why this platform group exists by even not building anything, just helping your internal teams become more familiar with the things you expect to help them with, understand those domains a bit better, even without changing technology. Just help them adopt better practices, understand why maybe they need, I don't know, some better alerts with less noise. It could be anything, but that kind of work, if you have that leeway to actually, let's do this before we invest in building, not only you're helping those teams, you also start to see more of, as Matthew mentioned earlier, what do we actually should build or not, or maybe there's stuff we thought was going to be helpful in the platform. Turns out teams already do this by themselves, and it's not something that affects their cognitive load. So that's sort of a bonus, but I understand it's not always possible, especially if you are starting to get people to understand why it can be very valuable to teach and mentor and facilitate over immediately start building stuff. All right. So we're getting to the end. We've actually already answered some of the questions in the chat. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Diana. She's in the background. She's one of the people who make sure the Academy works and keeps the lights on and does all sorts of things. I know you're listening, so thank you, Diana, for all that. She has collected questions also from the LinkedIn live streaming. We already replied to some of the questions in the chat. I believe there are 2 questions left, so let's look at those and then we'll close the webinar. So the first question is, what considerations do you have for front-end teams? I have seen front-end functional team is very distributed to streamline teams. Any ideas or observations from your experience? So I would say, if you are looking at the front-end team, so a team that's focusing only on building, let's say, the graphical aspects of, or the front-end aspects of your application, as a streamlined team, my question would be, what is the actual value stream that they're working on? Because the front end could be anything, right? So there I see a bit of a mismatch between the idea of a streamlined team is a team that can take stewardship of a service end-to-end or an application end-to-end. That necessarily means they are going to have to do a bit of everything: front end, back end, work on the APIs, test the whole thing. So to me, a front end team is sort of an anti-pattern where if you have front end team, then they will necessarily become a blocking dependency for other teams who need to make changes to that front end, right? It might be that at a certain moment you don't have a better approach, but eventually you would want to try to identify, okay, what are the actually flows of value to the customer so that we can then align the teams to that. Unless the front end team is more of an enabling team where they're actually not building stuff, they're helping the product teams or streamline teams understand more and improve their front end approach. All right, and then second question, an application product. So the question, application products is how the streamline teams are supposed to be formed. I think it's sort of related to the previous question. If you're building applications, products for your end customers, people, let's say, buying your product or service, usually those products are too complex for a single team to take care of all the aspects of that product. So yes, you should probably try to identify what are the different streams within that bigger product that we can then align the teams to. So those streams might be things like, well, we actually have groups of functionality that are fairly independent, so we can align the teams to those. Or we have very different personas, different types of users, for example, novice users versus expert users. So we need different teams to take care of those different needs. Again, going back to the user needs. Or it could be something else, like the user journeys are different, so you align the teams to those user journeys. All right, and I think we're about to close the webinar. I don't know if you have any final words you want to share, Matthew?
Just a final thing that Charlie asked, do you have any links relating to Wiki as a platform? So I've just put a link there. If you just go to github.com, search for team topologies, you'll see thinnest viable platform examples, and that's where all that detail is.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you, Diana, for doing the logistics and being in the background. One last thing to share here. We have recently launched community, Team Topologies community. So if you want to join, we have different spaces to discuss different things. And me and Matthew are there, as well as a lot of our partners and people with really deep experience with Team Topologies. So I would say that's a great place to join and ask questions. There will be some updates next year specific to the Academy, I hope, where we'll probably start having some spaces within this larger community to discuss specific aspects of the different courses we provide in the platform. And that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, commenting, asking questions, and see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.